Hello, good evening to all of you, and welcome to An Academy. Welcome to this special session where we are going to talk about essay writing. Now, as candidates, many of the times, even though we are beginners or even though we are veterans in this area, we don't know how to approach an essay. Because nowadays, UPSC has been asking such type of questions in essay, such as wisdom finds truth, truth always triumphs, and so on, that we are oftentimes at loss of words. That what do I write in this essay? And what ideally is a very rewarding subject and a rewarding GS paper, we end up losing crucial marks because of the essay paper. Mind you, one thing you have to keep in mind is that when you talk about the essay paper, if you are able to score well, that is going to be one of the rank deciders for you, because many of the candidates will have an average mark somewhere around 110, 115, 105. This is where you can actually create a difference. Now, what is this session going to be about? This is going to be about the framework of an essay. Why is essay important? What is it that UPSC is expecting out of the candidates? As candidates, how to think about the various different points, the examples, and also, when we select a topic, what are the areas we have to look into with the help of the PYQs, previous year questions of last year, before last year as well. Some of the questions we will take up for discussion. I want you to keep a pen and paper with you so that you are able to brainstorm along with me and bring newer perspectives and newer ideas to the table. Okay, so having said that, let us start the discussion for the essay paper. Let us try to understand what to write in an essay and how to think about in an essay. First of all, why is scoring well in essay paper so important? So, when you come across the essay paper, here, always remember in your mains exam, this is one of the first papers that you come across. Okay, one of the first papers. So, the momentum that you carry in the essay paper, that is something which is going to carry, or you will be carrying it till the entirety of the mains exam. So this decides your tempo, right? Very important to decide the tempo of the answer writing and the mains exam. And it carries 250 marks. Think about it. You study history, geography, society, all of them, GS paper 1, 250 marks. IR, governance, social justice, all of them, polity, 250 marks. Right? Here, just this essay paper is 250 marks. And this will decide your rank. This will decide whether you clear the prelims or clear the mains exam or not. Why? Because in GS paper 1, GS paper 2, and GS paper 3, you will mostly get a very average amount of scoring. You will not get very high amount of marks. That is, whatever the general public scores, somewhere in that range, you will be able to score thereby. Not very high, not very low. It is the essay paper where if you score 140 plus, you are through. Okay, so very important here. Now, what is an essay, by the way? From our childhood days, we would have written some essay or something for, let's suppose, my favorite place, my favorite relative, India. You would have written the essay in your childhood days as well. So, what is an essay in general? So, essay is a literary device for saying almost everything about anything, any topic which is there. You can basically think about multiple different perspectives and then bring it to the table. What is it that UPSC expects out of you? So that is also important for you to understand that I am writing an essay, but what is UPSC's expectation? UPSC has set a very clear cut expectation out of the candidate. Read the notification here. In the notification, what UPSC tells us is that candidates are required to write essay on multiple topics, two topics. They will be expected to keep closely to the subject of the essay, to arrange their ideas in an orderly fashion, and to write concisely. Do not beat around the bush. Address the topic at hand. It should not be that the essay is about truth always triumphs. I have started writing about Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, so that is where you have to be very, very precise as possible. Credit will be given for effective and exact expression. This indicates the role of vocabulary. You need a good vocabulary as well. Vocab skills should be to the point. How to develop that? We will talk about it at the end of the session. Okay, how to work upon your English. English is very important. You cannot have a good essay with multiple grammatical mistakes, with multiple errors that you commit. You cannot think about a good essay in that ways. Okay, so you have to basically have a good vocabulary. Now, before we move ahead, a brief announcement for all of you appearing for the mains examination and preparing for the mains examination. We have the Conquer Mains program for UPSC Mains 2026, live lectures for mains. All the educators will provide live answer writing, guidance, evaluation of the papers. You will have the toppers also being able to talk about how to write, for example, ethics, essay, what they have gone through, how they have scored the maximum marks, and you have these mains copies as well. So the mains copy is basically concise notes associated with each of the GS papers so that your revision is to the track. So do avail this. Okay, the classes start from 8th of June. Now, coming back to the topic, you would have written essays in your school also, college also. What is UPSC essay and what is so special about UPSC essay that you have to write differently? First of all, the area is much broader. Okay. An understanding of the topic is needed in depth. You need to understand a topic. For example, values are not what humanity is, but what humanity ought to be. Here, ought to be is also something that you need to understand, that it is a goalpost set for the humanity, right? The human race. So that is where the topic understanding should be deep. You have to present perspectives which are socio-political, economic, cultural, national, and international issues. Expression of ideas, importance of writing skills. What do we mean by writing skills? Your essay should have a flow. What do we mean by that? That the essay should have a flow. That when you write the intro of the essay, after that, the last sentence of the intro should not end abruptly. You That last sentence should have a flow in the body. Okay, whatever you have written at the end, that should have a flow into the body portion, and whatever you have written in the body, that should then flow into the conclusion. So the flow of ideas is very important. This is where many of the candidates, what they do is they jump from one issue to another so frequently, they then don't realize that the essay looks very haphazard. So writing skills, importance of writing skills, multifaceted approach, development of perspective. Word limit is 1200 words. So you can be very, very creative as well, right? Imagine it like a blank canvas that UPSC has given you to express your ideas, and then put your pen to the paper. And any topic, unless and until you validate it with today's examples, your essay is incomplete. So you have to necessarily validate it with the present examples as well. Always. We'll take a look at it. Now, what is the pattern of the exam in the essay paper? So you have two sections. Okay, you have section A and section B. In each of them, you will have four topics. Four topics, each of them. Okay. Now, as a candidate, you have to select one topic here and one topic from here. Okay. So you are expected to write two essays, each of them 125 marks, 1000 to 1200 words for each one of them. Now, let me address one doubt that majority of the candidates have. Upon interacting with the people who are appearing for the mains exam, also, I've realized this. People have the misconception that if I write an essay for a common topic, which everyone is writing the essay of, I will get less marks. How many of us have that misconception? Let me know. That if everybody is writing on this essay, I will also, if I write uh, an essay on this topic, I will get less marks. Please do not have that preconceived notion. Please do not have that misconception. Write the essay on the topic on which you can have your best foot forward. If everybody has written the essay on that, doesn't matter. Please do not try to choose any topic so out of ordinary that you yourself are at a loss of word. So please choose a topic where you are comfortable. Okay? Secondly, one thing, that each of the essays of 125 marks. Many of you would think that this is so logical. Why is he stressing on this? There's a reason. Because what happens is, in the exam hall, you have 3 hours. Ideally, you should spend 1.5 hours each on each of the topics. What I have seen the candidates to do is that for the first 2 hours, they will write essay on only one topic. They will beautify that essay as much as possible. And on the second essay, they will only spend 1 hour or 45 minutes. They forget that both of them carry equal weightage, right? So if you are hustling for the first topic, why to give short time or small amount of time window for the second topic? Keep a hard stop that if 1.5 hour time window is crossed, that's it. As soon as 1 hour crosses, I have to start wrapping up my essay. Okay, so that is why you have to score well in the second essay as well. Now, what are the kind of topics which are? So, before I come to the type of topics, another question that I am oftentimes frequently asked is basically, when we are writing the essay, how should we go about in terms of word distribution, in terms of the time distribution? Okay, that is another topic. That is another query that I oftentimes face. So, how to go around when we talk about the time distribution first? Time distribution. So, what you should do is, you have 90 minutes for each essay. Okay? 90 minutes allocated for each essay. Now, upon selection of a topic, once you have selected a topic, then you start. Now, don't immediately ever start writing the essay from there itself. Never. When, let's suppose, you have finalized that this is the topic on which I am supposed to write an essay, what do you do after that? After that, what you are supposed to do is, first of all, brainstorm. Brainstorming. Brainstorm the ideas. Prepare a rough work. Okay? That what am I going to write in the introduction? What am I going to write in the body? Which are the examples I can think about? What are the perspectives that I can think about? Historical, geographical. Do I recall any anecdote, any case study, any particular data pointer, any kind of ideation in terms of, let's suppose, the Jataka stories, any story from the freedom movement, life of Mahatma Gandhi, life of Gautam Buddha, any of these? Can I think about it? So all that has to be dotted in this rough work. That is very, very important. So that is why rough work becomes important. This has to take your 15 minutes of your time. 10 to 15 minutes out of this 90 will be consumed in this. Then after that, you start the writing. When you write, now what should be the word distribution? That also let me tell you. So you have to write 1000 to 1200 words. Okay. 1000 to 1200 words, let's suppose. Now, intro should ideally be around 120 to 150 words. Okay? 120 to 150 words should be your introduction. If required, let's suppose you're writing a poem, let's suppose you are reproducing a story. If it exceeds by 25 words, doesn't matter. But cap it there itself. Okay. And after that, switch into the body. Once you are writing the intro, please ensure that the last thought that you have written in the intro, the last sentence that you have written in the intro, it should have a natural flow in the body. For example, let's suppose you are providing a historical perspective. Okay. Let's suppose you have the case, an essay topic, wisdom finds truth. Okay. Wisdom finds truth. This is a PYQ, previous year question. Now, in this, let's suppose I start with the case of an anecdotal story about the life of Gautam Buddha. That how, as a prince, Siddharth was quite restless initially, trying to find the meaning of life, trying to understand that what is the purpose of life? What do I do with all the wealth that I have? Right? Let's suppose Siddharth was thinking in this time. And then you talk about the entire story that eventually he went for and attained enlightenment through meditation and so on. And eventually he understood the meaning of life. That if we have to achieve nirvana, right, in that case, I have to adhere to these kind of principles. Then I will be free of the vicious cycle of pain and so on. So that is the anecdotal story that you have written. Now, at the end of this anecdotal story, you will link it to the main topic. That this also evidences that wisdom eventually found the truth. So that is your intro. Once you have done this, now should you directly jump to another portion? No. When you start the body, that is where you have to remember that the last sentence was that this story indicates that wisdom finds truth. And the next sentence should begin with that it can also be found in other instances like the freedom struggle. And then you talk about Mahatma Gandhi's Satyagraha. This is one way. Another way can be that then you start explaining what is wisdom. So, when we talk about, or when the term wisdom is analyzed or examined, it is not the literary knowledge or the bookish information that you receive from somewhere. Wisdom is the ultimate intellect and the intellectual growth, which can be attained from generational knowledge, which can be attained from experience of the world, which can be attained from our past experiences, all of that. So you start examining the case of wisdom. So wisdom can be of many different forms, right? Then you, let's suppose you start examining truth. So this is how you have maintained a flow. So the body portion should have roughly around 800 words, 600 to 800 words. Multiple change of paragraph is required in this. You should not limit the paragraph change. Change the paragraphs of paragraphs. Okay? Please, please never think about writing it in a homogeneous manner. No evaluator will read it. Now, then conclusion. Conclusion is what? Summarization of your ideas that you have presented. A kind of a way forward. All of that has to be there in the conclusion. Again, around 150 or 100 words. Okay? This should take, once you have worked upon the brainstorming or the rough work, you have declared or decided upon a pattern. I will show you how to do the rough work also. Once you have done that, it should take 60 minutes or 1 hour for you. Okay. What to do for the rest of the time? Use the remaining, let's suppose, 5 minutes or 7 minutes you have in your hands. 5, or let's suppose 7 minutes. use this 7 minutes to go through your essay, not to add another pointer. You have added enough pointers to underline some of the key phrases that you want the evaluator to read, to basically correct some of the major grammatical or spelling errors that you have committed, which will give a very wrong impression or image to the evaluator. That is how you distribute your time, and you will find that you are well within the time window to complete the essay. You will never fall short of time, provided you put enough stress on this portion of brainstorming. That is must. Now, the types of essay topics which are asked in the examination. So you see, earlier what used to be the case is that section A would be the case of philosophical essays, and section B would be the case of GS based essays. That would be the earlier pattern. First of all, understand what is philosophical essay. These are also abstract topics, not referring to any particular issue at hand, but a larger set of questions. Customary morality cannot be a guide to modern times. Okay. This is not referring to any issue at hand. You can address multiple issues. Right? Wisdom finds truth. Reality does not conform to the ideal, but confirms it. Okay. Values are not what humanity is, but what humanity ought to be. Then in section B, there would be questions such as associated with alternative technologies for a climate change resilient India, how to mitigate the impact of climate change, management of Indian border dispute, a complex task. These used to be very GS based topics. If you are good in your GS, you would have been very good in these essays. It was like an answer writing. Now, what UPSC has done is quite interesting. UPSC has stopped asking questions on GS based topics. I don't know, unless and until it suddenly decides to change the pattern. But going by the pattern since the past 4 to 5 years, UPSC has been asking only philosophical essays. Only philosophical essays. In section A also, in section B also. Now, many of the candidates, they get scared. Okay, that how will we solve this? We will not be able to address this. This was easier for us. We know about border management. We could have written an essay out of it. How do we write an essay here? What I argue, and today when I'm standing in front of you, I will tell you this is a good news for you. Because earlier, what used to be the case, if a question is asked, as was the case in 2019 mains exam, that health and education are the reasons for India's poverty and backwardness. Okay. You could support the topic, you could argue against the topic, but a good essay in that kind of a question would require you to present data pointers regarding health, global data pointers regarding education, the Pratham report, the SR report that you have, the literacy rate, etc. And then global parameters, poverty index. So you would have to put in lot of effort to write an essay which could secure marks. Now what you have is that UPSC allows you to explore. Write whatever you understand and just impress the evaluator. This is a big opportunity, provided you know what to think about. Customary morality cannot be a guide to modern times. What does this mean? What is the meaning of this essay? When we say customary morality, right? Think about it. How to change paragraphs? So, Radhika, what you do is once you talk about a particular topic in this, after that, you have to change the perspectives. I'll come to the fact that how to change perspectives, how to think about each of the examples that you can provide in different paragraphs. And like that, you can go ahead. What is customary morality? For example, you have the Parda system in our country, right? Now, this is something which is a custom in a society which has been followed for a long time. What is considered to be moral in the society for a long period of time? Moral and immoral. right? So customary morality cannot be a guide to modern times. So what was the case with the Parda system, etc.? That cannot be a guide to the modern times, right? You can give endless examples. Sati Pratha was a customary morality at one point of time. Now, Sati Pratha is abolished. Okay, so with the changing of times, this was basically discarded. Then, child marriage was a customary morality, it has been abolished. Then, for example, you talk about many such instances, widow remarriage. You can give the example of the social, political, and the social religious reformers also. But then, here you also have the scope to contradict the topic. How? Can customary morality still guide us in the modern times? For example, one of the customary morality that we have in our society is the respect to the elders that we provide, isn't it? And also, we treat our elders, adults, almost as gods. We treat our parents almost as gods, right? So, serving them, gaining information and experience from them, that can be a guide for modern life. That will help us navigate the difficulties of the modern life cycle also, isn't it? So that is where you have a lot of scope to expand your thought. Customary morality in terms of international aspects also you can bring to the table. Earlier, there used to be the condition, right? The absolute morality conditions in terms of international relations or international cases would be what? That you have to basically adhere to the rules set by someone, right? But in modern times, is that the case? No. In modern times, we are living in a multi strategic, multipolar world. That is how you diversify. Okay. So, in another case where you can contradict it, for example, when you talk about the case of climate change, customary morality in our case is what? We respect nature as a living civilization. Indians and Chinese, we are the two living civilizations in the region for a long period of time. Now we respect nature. We worship nature, isn't it? Isn't that a guide in the modern times also? From Chipko movement to the movement by the Bishnoi community, everywhere we see that, isn't it? So that is where it can be a guide in the modern times also. So, like that, you can diversify. Okay. So now you only have the case of the philosophical topics out there, which is an opportunity. Now, how do you start an essay? Very important to choose the topic. That is where half the battle is won or lost. Many of the times, what happens is when the candidates take a look at the question paper, obviously you are appearing for the mains examination. You are in the top 10,000 or 12,000 of the entire group of students. So your preparation is good. For any topic that is thrown at you, you will have the ability to write at least 200 to 400 words. Okay. You'll be able to write at least 200 to 400 words. So, how should we select a topic? I already told you, don't fall into the trap that everybody is writing an essay on this. I will not write an essay on this. No, that is the trap that you have to actively avoid. So, what should I do? Keep one thing in mind, the principle of beyond 400 words. What does that mean? That means what will I write beyond 400 words? First 400 words are there in my mind. I will simply talk about Gautam Buddha's life experience, Mahatma Gandhi's experience. Already 100 words are done, some historical perspective, some political scenario, 200, 300 words are done. What after that? Do I have enough fodder for that? So once you start thinking in these lines, then selection of topic will be easier. Let's suppose if I have a topic, reality does not conform to the ideal but confirms it. Okay, here I don't know what I will be able to write after 200 words, right? As a candidate, I will not write an essay on this. In customary morality, if let's suppose in my mind I am only able to think about sati system, child marriage, I'm not able to diversify into the environmental, ecological, economic, social aspects, I will not write an essay on it. So that is where you have to think what to write beyond 400 words. Okay? Right. Yes, Kirti, that can also be a point, that it cannot be a guide in the modern times. Once you have chosen, otherwise, please also be aware about, it is important for me to tell you the mistakes that other candidates do. As important as it is in UPSC to know what to do, it is equally important to know what not to do. So many of the candidates, what they do is, and you will come across these candidates in this year mains exam also, next year mains exam also. They select a topic, they start writing about it. After they have written a page, they realize they don't have so much. They could have written a better essay about some other topic. They cut that and then they start writing the essay for another topic. It wastes time. It creates a wrong impression in front of the evaluator. You will never secure more than 100 marks. Whatever is the case, how beautiful essay you have written, you will never secure more than 100 marks in the essay paper. So please be very, very careful in selecting this topic. After that, for every topic, there are certain keywords. Identify them. Okay? Those keywords have to be addressed. Remember, in the notification, what does UPSC say? Maintaining your expression concisely and keeping along with the topic. Don't divert, right? Earlier, in our childhood days, we would rectify the essay in a class one or class second level, where even if you had an essay about Taj Mahal, you would write essay about something else altogether, right? Don't divert, and that will only happen if you are able to identify the keywords. Okay, and then do the rough work. This is very, very important. Arrangement of ideas, very important. How to arrange the ideas, how to go for brainstorming. Let's start with identification of the keywords with the help of some of the PYQs. Values are not what humanity is, but what humanity ought to be. Okay. Now, in this, there are two keywords: values and humanity. These are the two keywords: values and humanity. So, your essay has to revolve around, first of all, the meaning of values, the expression of humanity. Humanity doesn't mean human beings. Humanity refers to being humane, being empathetic, that emotional quotient, that is important. So you have to understand these keywords, and your essay will revolve first around these, then the entire expression. What is the meaning of it? We will discuss this in detail, this particular topic in detail, in a short time. Then, wisdom finds truth. Two keywords: wisdom and truth. Okay. So that is how you identify the keywords. Okay. Now, if you analyze your previous year question, you will find that there are lot of topics which have been asked revolving around the same keyword. Wisdom finds truth. Truth is lived, not taught. When money speaks, truth is silent. In all of them, truth is a keyword. Even last year, that is in 2025, you had a question: truth knows no color. Keyword was truth. Another keyword was color. So if you have a framework which is developed around the keyword, then you will be able to craft an essay regardless of whatever is thrown at you. So please work on some of the keywords. And how do you work on those keywords? What do you do? Is there any book that you can refer to? No. What do you do? The biggest teacher in this case is your previous year question. Refer to the previous year questions, the philosophical essays post 2019. refer to the philosophical essays post that. Why am I saying 2019? Because that is when the pattern started changing suddenly. Candidates found it difficult. But post 2019, all the questions are keyword driven. Keyword driven. Very important part of the essay writing is also to add perspectives to your essay. Values are not what humanity is, but what humanity ought to be. You know, the meaning is expressed in the question itself. But you cannot write 1200 words simply explaining the same thing again and again. You need to be able to add perspectives. So, here, very important idea that I will give to you, that there are two kind of expansions for an essay. Two kind of expansions. What are those two kind of expansions? One is, what is your vertical expansion? Yes, Pratima, PYQ, the themes get repeated. One is your vertical expansion. Another is your horizontal expansion of any topic. Okay? So you will have a vertical expansion and you will have a horizontal expansion. What do we mean by vertical expansion? When you take a look at any particular topic, is it valid at a personal level, at an individual level? If yes, write about it. For example, values are not what humanity is, but what humanity ought to be. So, how an individual behaves should not be determined by the circumstances around them, but what is the ideal. If everyone around a civil servant is a corrupt individual, does not mean that the civil servant also becomes corrupt. What humanity ought to be. What is the expected integrity out of a civil servant? That is what the behavior of the civil servant and the approach of the civil servant should be. So it is applicable on a personal level. If it is applicable on a personal level, can it be applicable at the level of, let's suppose, a family or society? So, what are you doing? You are zooming out. Individual, family or society, eventually nation. So, family or society, think about it. Presently, you will have a norm, you will have a trend where elderlies are not respected. For example, I'm just giving the family angle. Now, if that is the norm, does that mean it should be followed in every family? No. That is where you should have the respect, right? That is one of the ideas. Societal angle. We are living in a post truth world where every society is doubting the members of their own. There is an otherization which is done based on caste, based on color, based on creed, based on religion, based on ethnicity, based on nationality. There is an otherization, right? Across the world, from US to Europe, everywhere you will observe that. Now, as a society right now, if let's suppose we are also suspicious towards the member of our society, it will lead to fragmentation, it will lead to suspicion, growth of radicalization, fundamentalism, even the outcome of a disruption or a rupture and eventual societal breakdown. So the society should not behave based on the present norm. Society should accept, or should set example of how the societies operate. So yes, this topic is applicable at the society level also. If it is applicable at the level of the society, can it be applicable at the level of the nation? Simple example. Right. Simple example. When we talk about India as a nation, the entire world suffered from COVID pandemic. Now, what was the world's behavior? US started hoarding all the vaccines across the world. Many of those millions of vaccines, they got wasted, right? India is a poor country. We could have also followed the same thing. What did we do? We followed an approach of Vasudev Kutumbakam. The world is my family. We initiated vaccine diplomacy. So, we did not follow our values based upon what the present condition of humanity is, but what humanity ought to be. That is what India did. Another example, India and Turkey do not share the best of the relations. But when there was an earthquake which struck Turkey, we did not hold a grudge inside that, look, you were inimical to us, we will not help you. No, we were amongst the first responders. We sent a team to the ground that, yes, humanity comes first. So our values followed what humanity ought to be. So, like this, you suddenly get at least around 150 words that you can write in any particular topic. This is known as the vertical expansion of the topic. Now, there is something known as the horizontal expansion. I will also, after this, I'll come to how to think about this, how to get these ideas. Okay, I will come to that. But first of all, what is the horizontal expansion of the topic? Horizontal expansion is basically how to diversify your thoughts. Okay, historical perspective for any topic, geographical perspective if it can be presented, geographical, political, social, political, social. Okay, then let's suppose the case of environment, then let's suppose the case of international relations, international perspective. So what you are doing is that you are basically providing multiple cohort of examples and different thought process in any particular topic, right? Now, how do we think like this? It is easy for me to stand here and say that do this, write this topic also, write this historical perspective also. As a candidate, I am new to this, right? I have never written an essay before, let's suppose. How do I think about it? Simple logic in this case is know your GS syllabus, general studies syllabus for the mains exam. I hope everybody would be aware about that. Start with GS paper 1. GS paper 1 comes about or talks about which topics? History, art and culture, right? Geography, then society, isn't it? So, for any topic, can I find a historical anecdote? Can I find something which has happened in the freedom struggle, the life of Mahatma Gandhi? Let's suppose international aspect, for example, life of Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan, any of them, right? Gautam Buddha, Mahavir, Bhagwan Mahavir, any of them. Can I think about a historical perspective? Can I think about a geographical angle? That in this region of the world, this was the outcome. Then move to GS paper 2, polity and governance, IR, social justice. Values are not what humanity is, but what humanity ought to be. Is there any political angle associated? Yes. In the present era, where opacity and lack of accountability of the political class is a norm, we are transitioning as a country for the past couple of decades to e-governance, isn't it? E-governance will always bring in greater amount of transparency, where the Western world, like the US, is basically associating itself with keeping the rich people happy, top population happy. Our governance initiatives have been to provide food support, ration support to 80 crore odd Indians, the largest food support scheme anywhere across the world. Political governance angle has been brought. Social justice, international relations aspect, I've already told you about. So that was GS paper 2. Then GS paper 3. What are the syllabus? What are the subjects in GS paper 3? Economy. During the COVID pandemic, everybody adhered to the case of a very loose economy or a liberalized economy where there was quantitative easing. We did not do that. We suffered initially, but thanks to that, we did not enter the phase of recession as was observed in the case of Japan. So we followed the fundamentals of humanity, not. So it is not always the case, by the way, that you will find one topic from or one perspective from each of the topics. But what I'm trying to indicate here is that this is how you can diversify your thoughts. Environmental perspective, then science perspective, okay, and then eventually the ethical angle. So that is how, once you think from GS paper 1 to GS paper 4, you automatically will get multiple pointers on which you can write the essay. So this is about how you can think, how you can basically bring points to the table. It will not happen in one day. It will happen with multiple brainstorming sessions. You think about it again and again. What can be the environmental angle associated with this? What can be the sporting angle associated with this? Okay, now keeping that, so that is basically the case of vertical expansion and the horizontal expansion. I hope this is clear to everyone. Everybody is comfortable with this. We will be able to expand the essay. Now, think about this particular essay. Values are not what humanity is, but what humanity ought to be. Now, think about it. First of all, important to brainstorm as well. You have to brainstorm. Now, I will follow the same template. Can I think about a historical perspective? So, there are various different ways in which you can introduce the essay. Different ways. One is what is known as anecdotal introduction. Anecdotal introduction. What is the meaning of anecdotal introduction? If I have a story in mind, if I have an instance in mind, life story indicated by the Jataka tales, Mahatma Gandhi's story, story of the freedom struggle, right? Any of this, Sun Tzu's story, any of them, that is your anecdotal introduction. Then another kind of introduction is your quotation based. Quotation based means what? I will start with a quote. If I remember that, then I will start with a quote. But here also, let me tell you, oftentimes the questions are such. You would have ratified a set of quotes. UPSC will ask you a different question altogether. Never panic in that case. If you remember a quote, fair enough. If you don't remember a quote, don't panic. It's okay. 99.99% of the people who will clear the exam, the mains exam, they would not have remembered any quotation. It's okay to, because I have seen overt amount of emphasis that where can I get all the quotes? Okay, where can I access all the quotes? There's a limitation of how much you can access, how much you can retain. Okay, now in case, in case the question is so tough and you have no option to select an easy of the essays, then there is another kind of introduction that is known as direct introduction. What is direct introduction? In that, you directly start with explaining the keywords in detail. Okay, what do we mean by values? Have the values, are the values static or are the values dynamic? Right? Explore those keywords. So, for example, when we talk about values, accepted set of norms prevalent in a society at any given point of time, considered to be reverential, considered to be beneficial, or considered to be overall acceptable. Okay? Values. Now, values, are they static? No. Values change with time. Values have a very dynamic nature associated. Values have a temporal variation and a spatial variation. What do we mean by that? That not only do they vary with time from olden days to present days, but also from one region to another, values will be different. What is the value which is followed, let's suppose, in the Western Hemisphere, will be very different from the set of values that are followed in the Eastern Hemisphere. The East Asian nations, for example, when you talk about countries like China, Vietnam, India, all of these. India is not East Asian, but I'm talking about the Eastern Hemisphere in general. Now, in these countries, you have a knowledge based society. Everybody respects knowledge. Even in our society, even today, for example, if let's suppose you will find in your rural areas, if someone is unemployed, but that person has got a master's degree, right, is PhD, that person will always be consulted by the village elders also. So, what is your opinion on this? So, this is a knowledge based society, right? We regard, we respect wisdom and knowledge. Western society is very entrepreneurial in terms of its outcomes. That was determined by their geographical realities, harshness, etc. They are very entrepreneurial. We are not that entrepreneurial because we always had the favorable geography for us. Right? Food was easily available in this part of the world. We did not have the frozen winters to tackle with. So that is why values change. So values are spatial, values are temporal. That is something you explored. Then what is humanity? So all that you can put in the case of the direct introduction. Okay. Now, if let's suppose you are writing a quotation, can we write quotation? Another set of query that I get is, can we write a quotation in Hindi? Or if my mother tongue is, let's suppose, Tamil, can I write a quotation in Tamil? Can I write a quotation in Kannada? Absolutely yes. Write it. But what you need to do is, let's suppose I have a quotation that I have to write in Tamil, let's suppose, or Hindi, Devanagari script. Once I have written the quotation, I'll put it in quotes, I will leave a gap, then write the English interpretation, because you are still writing the exam in English. Okay? Write the English interpretation immediately after that. Then write the linkage to the topic. Can we use optional subject related examples, Deepika? Absolutely yes. The thinkers that you read in paper 1, in whichever optional that you are studying, paper 1 is associated with thinkers. Bring that knowledge. If you are reading PubAd, PSIR, Anthro, Socio, Geography, History, you would have come across many thinkers. Bring that to the table. Okay, so simultaneously multiple baskets will be covered. It will indicate to the evaluator you have a depth, but do not try to deliberately pull something out of the hat if it is not related to the topic. Stick to the topic as much as possible. Okay, now linkage to the topic. If you remember the name of the thinker, you should mention the name of the thinker always. Okay, that is how you express quotations. If you are writing an anecdote, for example, let's start with this essay. Values are not what humanity is, but what humanity ought to be. Let's start with a simple anecdote. The anecdote, let me know if you are able to think about any of the anecdotes. One of the anecdote that we can think about is the Chori Chora incident. incident. Whatever regional language you are writing in, immediately write it in English also. How do I link the Chori Chora incident to the topic? Values are not what humanity is, but what humanity ought to be. At that point of time, if you remember, around the 1920s, early part of 1920s, the world was going through a kind of a rebellious phase. Russian Revolution had just happened, right? It led to a lot of violence in that region eventually. Then you had a couple of decades ago the various different wars which had happened. Then you had a kind of a revolution in the, let's suppose, in the region of Turkey. There also you had a kind of a revolution which had gained some violent proportion. In the midst of this, when the non cooperation movement was started, the entire country was filled with a belief that independence is quite near. We need to persist. Everyone was together for the common goal, independence of India. Everyone worked simultaneously. When the Chori Chora incident happened, when you had the killing of the policeman, at that point of time, it was absolutely brave of Mahatma Gandhi to call off the entire non cooperation movement. Why? Because he said that we are not ready for independence right now. If we are independent right now, the society will be fractious, fragmented, and divided, violent. That is not the society that India has ever been. So, going by the norm, what is prevalent across the world, we cannot follow the same norm. As a society, we have to be very different. Values are not what humanity is, what humanity ought to be. That is what the Chori Chora incident told us. Okay? So that is basically the case of anecdotal incident that you have provided. After the anecdote, I hope everybody is able to understand how to link this. After the anecdote, leave a line of space and then start talking about the linkage with the topic. With the topic. That this incident teaches us about the relevance, importance of adhering to what humanity ought to be. Okay? This is one of the ways in which you can introduce the answer. You can also introduce the answer. Always advisable, however, to write the historical perspective first. Always advisable. If, however, we are not able to bring forward a historical perspective, we should not panic. If we are able to think about an international perspective, bring that to the table. And then once you have linked it with the topic, then after that, if there is a historical perspective, I will bring. Otherwise, I will then examine the keywords. Now, once you have done this, you have examined or you have written the anecdote, you have linked it with the topic, you have already spent around 100 to 125 words. Change the paragraph. Change paragraph. You can bring to the table the current, any of the current events as well. That is also good. After that, advisable, not fixed, advisable, examine the keywords. The keywords. Okay? Explain in the next paragraph the meaning of values. What is it? What are values? Understand the meaning of values. Are the values permanent? Ask this question. Write this. Are the values permanent? History teaches us that values change. The regions or civilizations which have not allowed the values to change or keep up with the times are the ones which face a kind of a decline. Okay? Like that, you can talk about change with space, change with regions. Never in your essay write point wise. No, this is not a GS answer that you are writing. Write it in paragraph. Change the paragraph. This is one paragraph. Okay? Everything. Maybe around 50 words, 60 words will be in one paragraph. Then what you can do is give examples in the next paragraph of what? Example of values that you have talked about. Then after that, once you change the paragraph, analyze the case of wisdom. How is it attained? What is being wise? Does that mean literacy? Does that mean qualification? No. Wisdom is based on experience, generational knowledge. Generational knowledge means which is passed down the generations, right? What your grandparents would have told your parents, what your parents have been inculcating into you. Generational, societal information or experience, right? The why, it is the case that the smart ones, they learn from their own mistakes. The wise learn from others' mistakes, right? So that is basically where you can bring to the table the entire paradigm of wisdom. How attained? What is it? How is it attained? So all this you are writing in the body portion. This is the start of your body. Okay? Then after that, what you do? You start going for vertical and horizontal expansion. Horizontal expansion. In any which way that you like. Horizontal expansion. Any way that you deem fit, go for the vertical and the horizontal expansion. This is how you can think about it. Now, what are the vertical and the horizontal expansions of this topic? Values are not what humanity is, but what humanity ought to be. We have discussed about the historical perspective, isn't it? Historical perspective. If you remember any folk tales also, right? Something that you have heard about, which is a very regional folk tale. Translate it into English and write it down. That can also be an anecdotal introduction. Okay. Then society. We have discussed that presently everywhere you have the case of the mistrust. So from mistrust to trust, mistrust to fraternity. Okay. Then the case of political angle, political. That is where you can think about the case of e-governance, e-governance, RTI. You ask the question directly from the people in power. Okay. That is a kind of a departure from normal. IR, we have discussed about vaccine diplomacy of India. Vaccine diplomacy. We can discuss more about the humanitarian and disaster relief rescue operations. Okay, that is the IR perspective that you bring to the table. Environment. In the world where development takes priority, we still have the outcomes of the Chipko movement, Bishnoi community, and their conservation of the black bucks community, right? Where presently you have a norm where, let's suppose, everybody is seeking the animals to be preserved in forests and humans to be living somewhere. You have the tribes like the Maldharis who not only have coexisted with the lions, who have thrived with the lions. That also you can bring to the table, right? Then, to diversify your thought, let's suppose sports. In an era where doping, cheating, etc., had become a norm, you had the case of multiple individuals. People like you had Lance Armstrong, right? The famous cyclist. Now, he admitted to consuming steroids. In that era, you still have greats. You can take any example from Rafael Nadal to Djokovic, Roger Federer, cricket, Formula One, any sport that you follow. Bring that to the table, right? Then science and tech. Give the example for suppose now you have the Anthropic CEO was under a lot of criticism by Pentagon and by Mr. Trump himself because he believed in the ethical angle of AI, was not ready to share the entire AI tool with the Pentagon, the Department of War. That is basically still thinking about humanity first in the development of newer technology, right? So that is the perspective that you can develop. You can talk about AI here. You can quote Sachin Tendulkar, obviously, yes. Then, other than that, think about it. When we talk about internal security, in that, let's suppose terrorism. Someone's terrorist is some other's freedom fighter. But at the end of the day, this activity endangers and kills human lives. It is the human lives which are at stake. So, for any cause, picking up the guns is never something which is advisable. We have seen the Gen Z rebellion in the region of Nepal, in Bangladesh. What they have done, they have changed the political system. But then, at the cost of what? Violence, social fracture. We have been a land where a large anti corruption movement was started by Anna Hazare, galvanized the entirety of the country, was peaceful nonetheless. So, that is the example you can give of social structure also. Terrorism, you can provide the example. Okay. And then eventually, the case of the importance of being ethical. Each of these perspectives that you have to provide, short paragraph difference, each of them have to cover different paragraphs. Now, will we be able to write around 1100 to 1200 words associated with this? I hope we will be, right? So this is basically your entire structure. That is what you are required to do in the case of brainstorming. This is your rough work or the brainstorming. And after this, you create an essay. Okay. Now, let's think through some other PYQs very quickly. Empires of the future will be the empires of the mind. Okay. This is also one of the questions which was asked, I think, in 2024. Empires of the future will be the empires of the mind. Please understand one thing that I forgot to mention. There was a question in 2024 that desert follows civilization, right? Now, I saw many of the candidates when they were discussing this essay, they simply started talking about desertification. That desertification has happened in Africa also, desertification is happening in India also. This is not a question. Desert follows civilization is not a question about desertification. If UPSC had to ask a question about desertification, it would have done so in GS paper. When UPSC is asking you a question that desert follows civilization, it is asking you to think about the possibilities. Desert. So, the question in its entirety was that forests are replaced by civilization and then desert follows them, somewhere in that range. So, it tells you to think about in the aspect of the human brain, human mind. Human mind is full of possibilities. But when you go through a kind of a rote learning exercise, let's suppose in your school terms, or the education that you receive, your mind starts getting desertified. Means what? It is bereft of ideas. It doesn't have variety. That is what desert is representative of. Uniformity. Okay? So if social norms oftentimes are followed, you have uniformity. That can be followed in social angle as well. So always try to think beyond what is immediately visible. That is what is required in a good essay. Okay? Now, the empires of the future will be the empires of the mind. So, in this, what do you write and how do you write an essay? First of all, now in the hindsight, we know it. If we didn't know it, it is a quotation provided by Winston Churchill. Okay. And also, one thing I would like to point out that in every essay, keep some scope to oppose the topic. Run your mind that how can I oppose the topic? Can I contradict this topic? Yes or no? Think about it. Okay. Empires of the future will be the empires of the mind. So here it talks about, in simplest of the terms, the military power to be replaced eventually by intellectual superiority. What are the key phrases in this? Empires of future and mind. These are your key phrases. So when we say empires of the future, in this, you can also have the case of, first of all, let me tell you about the case of the vertical expansion. Okay, let's suppose we talk about the family structure. Earlier, you had the case where the families, even today in many of the cases, you have the family structure which is quite patriarchal, isn't it? Based on the physical toughness, it is the patriarch which takes a call. Patriarch is the earning person in general. Societal norm I'm talking about. Don't point exceptions in this case. But when you talk about the empires of the future, in terms of the family structure, in terms of the societal structure, it would be egalitarian. Egalitarianism is brought by intellectuality, right? So that is also the empire of the future. Society also is an empire of the future. Empire does not necessarily mean Byzantine Empire, Mughal Empire, Delhi Sultanate. No. British Empire. No. That is one of the direct meanings. But there is other connotation of this empires of the future as well. Okay. Now, for a long period of time, we had observed that there are, so how to add the historical perspective in this? Historical perspectives. Okay. Now, whenever we talk about, let's suppose you can start with the case of the Nanda dynasty, right? In the Magadhan region. In ancient history, you would have studied about it, that the Magadhans, or in the region of Magad, you had the Nanda dynasty, which was quite powerful. It was the intellectual aspect and the intellectuality and the shrewd nature of Chanakya and Chandragupta Maurya, which eventually overpowered that and set up the entire Mauryan Empire. That is also one of the anecdote that you can provide. I hope so. You understand this. Other than that, you can talk about the case of here, the case of even technological changes. Whenever there has been a technological change in warfare, whenever, be it the introduction of gunpowder, be it the introduction of trebuchets, be it the introduction of tanks in the modern day era, be it the introduction of air bombing in the later part of World War One, now with the development of missile tech, that has created an empire of the future. So that is basically where you can talk about the tech changes associated with the empires of the mind that have dominated the physical empires also. Okay? You can also talk about the role of AI. Okay? Countering point, why we need to write at all. Should basically, why do we need to oppose the topics in the first place? Not necessary. Not at all necessary to oppose the topic. I am just saying, if you have the scope, then you can oppose it. Not at all mandatory to oppose the topic. But if you have the scope, always good to bring multiple sides to the spectrum. There is no thing in this world which is absolute black and white. Everything has a gray area. Values are not what humanity is, but what humanity ought to be. In that, for example, in the political perspective, you can talk about the Machiavellian world. India might be thinking that we will stick with values, and India would never have a good relationship with Afghanistan or Taliban. But then the real world Machiavellian politics tells us that Afghanistan is a very key area in the region of Central Asia. We cannot simply cede control of that or influence over that to the Chinese and the Pakistanis. And the goodwill of the people has to be maintained. So we maintain relation with Afghanistan and the Taliban, despite being very opposed to their values. So here we are following values, what humanity is, not what humanity ought to be. If we would follow values, what humanity ought to be, we would never have maintained relation with the Taliban. So that is how you can oppose it. So there is always a scope to oppose it if you think outside the table, outside the box. Okay, that is what essay writing is about, my dear, to bring different perspectives to the table. I hope you understand that. Okay. Now, here, let's suppose you talk about the world of AI. Now, in the world of AI is going to dominate the world, and multiple tanks can be defeated simply by cyber warfare. Isn't it? You talk about the case of the fourth and the fifth generation of warfare, where what you do is basically you simply talk about that how in the modern era of war you can go around and change the public opinion. For example, during the Cold War era between US and USSR, not a single bullet was fired, but somehow US managed to paint USSR as the villainous state. Soft diplomacy, right? The cultural diplomacy, right? Empire of the mind. In the present day era, the Korean culture is being very prevalent through the daily soaps and the Korean dramas. The Korean food is becoming prominent. Is Korea militarily so powerful to impose its thought process across the world? No. But it is the empire of the mind. That is how you think. That is how you diversify. Now, here also, let me tell you that how we can think or oppose the topic. Empires of the mind. Let's suppose I take a small country like Liechtenstein, right? European nation, Liechtenstein. Very rich, average literacy rate is very high, or Andorra for that matter. Now, can those countries defy US? No. At the end of the day, hard power still matters. Can you defeat an enemy like China just by keeping scientists on the forefront? No. You need hard power. So, empires of the future will still have a great role of the strength that a nation state indicates. That is also how you can contradict this. Okay, so that is basically how you can think about it. So, a quote by Winston Churchill, if you remember it, fair enough. A link with the empires of the past being militarily powerful, that might not be so necessarily important for the empires of the future. So, in this case, you can take the case of the Mauryan Empire, Byzantine Empire, the Ottoman Empire, Mughal Empire, any of those, you can keep a track of that. Then, the perspectives, importance of utilization of intellectual capability, very important. That a nation, a society values the growth of intellect. That is where we as a country can benefit. Why? Because we are a knowledge based society. That is also something we can think about. Importance of soft diplomacy. Remember the example I gave you of US versus USSR, right? Take the case of Korea. China right now is investing a huge amount in this soft diplomacy. What is soft diplomacy? Cultural outreach, right? Having um, a kind of an advertisement of what their own cultural traditions are through soaps, dramas, and so on. Technological advancements as a boon. That is when empires of the mind are there. Development of a knowledge based society. Our fight against climate change has to be smart. We no longer can rely upon the fact that unless and until all the emissions will reduce, only then we can have a cleaner climate. No. Now we can capture carbon from thin air, right? Carbon capture technologies can be used. Then the case of you have uh, various innovative ways of spraying sulfur based aerosols which can reflect solar rays, creating artificial volcanoes, right? Hoisting parasols in the architectural structure. So that is where we are getting smart in terms of the climate tech also. Then empires of the future can solve multifarious problems such as hunger. We have seen in the case of green revolution how in the limited space we have attained prosperity in terms of the growth of food. Energy crisis. A small amount of nuclear material can power a city almost perpetually rather than using tons and tons of coal. So here again, empire of the future is what we talk about. So that is how you bring perspectives. But there are dangers associated. Empire of the future is the rule of the AI. Now, this is where we have to be mindful of the ethical perspective. Okay, ethical perspective. Then, impact of fourth generation warfare, controlling the narratives. For example, one of the learnings from Operation Sindoor has been what? That in the narrative warfare, we still have a lot to do. While we did manage the victory on the battlefield, but Pakistan ran around with the narrative that our planes were shot. The reality of the matter is, even in the Bangladesh, the Liberation War, 1971 war, we lost more number of planes as compared to Pakistan because we were the force which attacked. Right? During World War II, US and UK combined lost more number of planes than the Luftwaffe or the Germans. But then they ended up being victorious. So that is where the fourth generation warfare is about controlling the narratives. That is dangerous also. There are risks involved. So when empires of mind come into place, we live in the case of the post truth world. deep fake. Okay, deep fake. Challenges can be exploited to create social and cultural divide. Okay, now one question that I will leave to you to think about. I have provided the entire gist of this also in the answer. Here, you will get the PDF which you can download. You can download it from my Telegram group also. You can download it through the link provided also. Truth knows no color. This is a question of 2025. Okay, think about it. But to get that strength, also hard power, we need mind. We do need mind. But for example, if you have a sixth generation plane, can you do with only two of the sixth generation planes and not nothing else? You will still need hundreds of 4.5 generation planes. You will still need hundreds of fifth generation planes. So that is hard power. Technology is the uh, soft power or the empire of the mind. So hard power is essential as well. Now, truth knows no color. Think about it. Here, isn't it similar to wisdom finds truth? If you would have prepared for wisdom finds truth, you could have written the answer clearly about this. Truth knows no color. Very simple answer writing you could have done. Right? What is this topic trying to convey to you? First of all, you have to examine the keywords truth, color. There is a saying that basically, truth, there is nothing known as absolute truth. It is all dependent on the perspective and your views, your own experience. For example, let's suppose, I'm just giving an example for you to think about. For example, let's suppose my childhood experience has been that when I see a monkey, let's suppose in my childhood days, I have a bad memory associated, a bad experience, right? So my truth is that monkeys can be dangerous. But someone else who has always lived in nature, who has been very friendly, knows the nature of the monkeys, knows that they will not come and harm you. For them, the truth is that they are beautiful creatures. Which is correct? My truth or that person's truth? You cannot say which is correct. It is based on my experience. That person's truth is based on their experience. For example, US sees Pakistan as one of the reliable partners. For India, the reality is we can never trust Pakistan. Our experience has been such. Our truth of Pakistan is very different from, let's suppose, a European's truth for Pakistan. They see Pakistan as a welcoming nation. So, truth is nothing but perspectives. But the topic is truth knows no color. That is, if you investigate, if you understand, then the reality is where the truth lies. That is what you have to link the truth to the case of reality. Friedrich Nietzsche had said, the famous philosopher, had said, all our actions are driven and dependent on our past experiences. That is how you will react today, is to be dependent on what your experience has been. That was Friedrich Nietzsche, right? So for him, truth is based upon the lived experience, right? So that is what I want you to explore. Think about the perspectives, brainstorm, if possible, provide that in the comment section. You will be able to download this. Anecdotes, for example, Buddha left home for the search of truth. Akbar, through his Sulhikul and Ibadat Khana, he basically called in various different types of scholars, various scholars from various religions. Why? in order to find the truth. So truth knows no color, no religious divide, no cultural divide. Truth is the absolute reality. Martin Luther King, fight for social justice. So this is what you can add to the table. Environmental perspective, I have provided it in detail, but I would suggest rather than reading through this, I want you to think about it first. Similarly, supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Okay, this was again a question of 2025. Okay, so I hope we have benefited from this session. Now, I want you to first of all think about these particular topics, right? Brainstorm about it. Some of the key pointers that you can bring to the table, put that in the comment section. Let there be a peer to peer review as well. You can download the entire framework, the PDF as well. Okay. If you have liked that, put that in the comment section. And don't forget to click on the like, share, and the subscribe button. We meet again tomorrow for the newspaper analysis in the morning. Till then, do take care of yourself. Goodbye. Thank you.